All right, well, I might start by welcoming everybody. Thank you very much for joining us on a cold and damp afternoon. I would like to acknowledge that our meeting is being held on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners of the land. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and any Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today. So this afternoon, we are going to hear from Elizabeth Baxter from VMCH. Elizabeth is my co-host in this meeting, as well as working for Villa Maria Catholic Homes. And I'll hand over to you, Elizabeth. Thank you very much for offering to speak today.
Great, thank you, and thanks for coming along, everyone. Now, I just wanted to talk about our Specialist Dementia Care Program. So I will, hang on, share my screen. Bear with me. Let's see, get the technology working. So can you see my screen there?
Yep. Yep.
And it is the PowerPoint program?
Now it is, yep, perfect.
Great. Okay, so I guess to start with the development of the Specialist Dementia Care Program, I thought I'd give you a little bit of background. I don't know if anyone here has heard of this. The acronym SDCP is sort of bandied around. So in 2016, the Australian government committed to establishing at least one specialist dementia care unit in each of the primary health networks. So this is an Australia-wide program, and the Specialist Dementia Care Program was planned and implemented using a phased approach. So the funding for the first unit was, I think it was released in 2019, and with the units expected to be operational by the start of 2020. So Brightwater in WA was the first specialist dementia care unit to open, and that was at the end of September 2019. And VMCH was the final of the current SDCP units to open, and we opened in November last year. So subject to evaluation outcomes, a further selection process for an additional 20 sites will be undertaken hopefully by the end of this year or the sort of early into 2022. Sorry, Donna?
That's okay. Someone else just entered the room.
No worries. Sorry. So there are currently 10 residential aged care providers operating these specialist dementia care units across Australia, and 3 of those units are in Victoria. So VMCH has one in Sunshine North in our St Bernadette's home. Hammond Care runs a unit in their Caulfield site, and Winteringham runs the 3rd one in Flemington. So the units provide specialised care to people with very severe behavioural and psychological symptoms of dementia. And the aim of the units is to reduce or stabilise symptoms so that people can move back into less intensive care settings. So essentially, the program is to support people who cannot be supported in a mainstream memory support unit or dementia-specific residential aged care setting. So it's also a transitional program. So the aim is that within 12 months, we introduce a whole lot of mental health, psychiatric support, a higher ratio of direct care staff team, a purpose-built environment that will hopefully help stabilise some of their experiences and symptoms of dementia to then allow them to move either back into a memory support unit or another suitable accommodation setting. So both VMCH and Winteringham are supported with their InReach program through Northwest Mental Health Service in Sunshine. So the objectives of the program broadly are to support people who cannot be supported in mainstream facilities. So these people would typically end up in a psych-geri ward or hospital settings, which are obviously not ideal for people living with dementia. And they're not equipped to support complex behaviours in a general sense. So in 2020, we refurbished and purpose-built, I say we at VMCH, so our purpose-built site is a 9-bed unit with the aim of having 8 of those beds filled with a 9th bed as a bounce-back option. So because it's a 12-month transitional type program, when somebody is transitioned out to a suitable accommodation setting, we need to have a bed available in case that transition out is unsuccessful so that they can come back. And we're still ironing out the kinks, and the department acknowledges that it's a really new program. So there's a whole lot of evaluation happening by Deloitte nationally, and then each of the sites need to complete a whole range of evaluation tasks as to how that transition in and transition out process is working, family feedback, obviously the residents' experience, quality of life measures, the neuropsychiatric inventory nursing home tool is used to determine progress every 3 months after admission. So there's a whole lot of measures to evaluate the success or otherwise of the experience of people. So the referral pathway is through Dementia Support Australia, or DSA, and there is a 3-tiered approach through their support. So usually people will be known to DSA through either phone call support through DB Mass or the SBRT program. The person is then likely to be triaged through to the Specialist Dementia Care Program, and then the needs-based assessment, which is what the assessment process is called for each person who is deemed eligible for the Specialist Dementia Care Program. I know this is a whole lot of acronyms and it's kind of a little world within its own. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask along the way or at the end, that's fine. So it's essentially based on the Henry Brodati triangle. And so I'll link to, if everyone's had enough time on that one. So the behavioural and psychological symptoms of dementia triangle, which was developed by Henry Brodati in, I think it was 2003. It's a 7-tiered model of service delivery for people living with dementia. And the focus is on understanding the trigger to the behaviour and the person's unmet needs around that. So typically DB Mass becomes involved around tiers 3 and 4. So when there's, mild to moderate BPSD, the SBRT program sits within tiers 5 and 6, and the Specialist Dementia Care Program sits within tiers 6 and 7. So the 7 tiers are based on the severity of symptoms, with tier 1 being no dementia or no symptoms, and going up the tiers. So each tier means different models of interventions are used, and people typically do move up and down tiers depending on their symptoms and the interventions used. So it's the triangle is meant to be used as a strategic device to organise planning services and not a way to clinically diagnose somebody. And the categories are fluid, so people can move up and down. Now I think that's all that's relevant around that one. Oh, there is just a note with the triangle that sometimes somebody might be experiencing an infection or something like that, which may precipitate a severe behavioural disturbance. So somebody might move from tier 3 to tier 6, and then treatment of the infection might mean that the person returns back to their tier 3 status. So we really need to explore what's underlying the behaviour, what interventions have been tried, and that's all part of determining eligibility for the Specialist Dementia Care Program. So referrals for the Specialist Dementia Care Program, it's all based around this needs-based assessment, or the NBA, another acronym. So DSA does all of the assessments across Australia. Consent is really important, and it's the responsibility of the referrer to obtain consent from the individual and their family, and it needs to be specific to which specialist dementia care unit is going to support the individual. So if the person specifically wants Hammond Care to provide the support, that needs to be stated and signed off on in the referral. And because the program is a national program, there is a national wait list. So individuals who consent to accessing any 3 of the Victorian providers, they can be waitlisted for all 3 providers, and the earliest vacancy will result in the NBA, the needs-based assessment being presented to that provider first for consideration. So there is a suitability requirement at each individual provider, and it depends on the staffing, it depends on the cohort of people that they support and the demographics and the mix of residents or clients within the unit at that time. So if you had 7 men in a unit, and there might be, some sexual behaviours or, targeting vulnerable young women, and then you have a younger person who, is really vulnerable and female and is presented to that site, they might decline that referral. I'm just generalising here, because the risks might outweigh the suitability of that person coming into that environment. So that referral might then go to one of the other local providers, as an example, probably a bad one, but you get the idea. So determining eligibility, the 3 key factors to consider. So essentially the behaviours need to be as a result of the dementia primarily. So there's a lot of psychiatric conditions, mental health history, very complex individuals that have come through the referral process to date. And the behaviour does need to be seen as severe to very severe. So, and that terminology around the behaviours have proved intractable to adequate trials of management essentially is just a really clinical way of saying we need to have tried everything else that we possibly could have tried before getting to the point of the Specialist Dementia Care Program, to ensure that that person is suitable for the program. And so this looks a bit complicated, but essentially this is our client pathway. So our unit is called Lady Lords, and this goes, sorry, does someone have a question? Or I've got a bit of feedback, perhaps. No. So we start up the top left of this pathway, this flow chart, and essentially pre-admission. So eligible clients are presented to, say, us as one of the Victorian providers, and we have a clinical advisory committee that meets to determine suitability of that individual and their individual needs for the current mix of residents that we have in the unit at that time. So it's expected the average length of stay in the unit will be 12 months. But again, with the option of a bounce back bed, if somebody is unsuccessfully transitioned out to another setting and it's not suitable, they can come back to the specialist dementia care setting. Our unit is currently full and we have a small waiting list, but we are due to transfer our first resident out in the coming month or so. So there's a whole lot of stuff around transitioning somebody in and transitioning somebody out, because the staff at site, so at Lady Lords, our SDCU, they would go and meet with the provider who's currently supporting the person who has been referred to our program. So say if it's Mrs. Jones and she is in a provider in Bendigo, our staff would liaise with the staff in Bendigo. They would talk about, what have you tried? What works? What's the environment like? Going through all of the ins and outs, meeting with the family, talking to the family, having a tour of the facility, which is, as I said, purpose-built. So it's very spacious. It's built on Fleming's Dementia Enabling Environments principles. So there's sort of that figure 8 layout where people can go through automatic doors, inside, outside. There's a lot of tactile kind of sensory artwork on the walls, a lot of quiet spaces, and plenty of room, like much more space than you would see in a typical residential aged care facility for only 8 residents, so that each person can have their own room, their own bathroom, and just space to come and go as they please. So yeah, with this pathway, it's a little bit complicated, but essentially the CAC is the Clinical Advisory Committee. So every specialist dementia care provider has one of these, usually weekly until the unit becomes full. And that is with the InReach, so a psychiatrist, a clinical nurse consultant, both of those people are from the InReach team. And then you've got a registered nurse on site and usually the site manager who will all discuss with a representative from Dementia Support Australia whether this person is going to be the right fit. So there's a very detailed assessment of that individual who's either deemed suitable or not. And if they're not suitable, they are returned to the wait list. And if they are suitable, steps will be taken for that handover and transition in. Okay, and I think that's all I had on my slides. I tried to keep it fairly simple, but I understand it's a complex program. So maybe if I throw that open, does anyone have any questions about referral or the program more broadly? Oh, a few more people have joined us. So I guess to talk a bit more about our experience with it then, we have found it quite interesting. I think nobody really knew what to expect when we were opening a service like this because it's not been done before. So it's quite new, I think, in terms of staff training and the need for that sort of mental health focus, as well as generalised residential aged care PCA training, personal care attendant training, and then the intensive sort of behavioural management stuff as well. So it's been really good having a psychiatrist involved, even though they are, so through Northwest Mental Health Service, they're really good at looking at non-pharmacological interventions. So in a hospital setting, normally people are, sedated essentially, as you probably all be aware, if they're displaying really complex behaviours. Pardon me, whereas this approach is really about non-pharmacological focus. Sorry, I've been talking so much, I just need some water. One moment. So maybe I've rushed through it, Sarah. Any questions?
I wanted to ask you, Elizabeth, I don't know how closely involved you've been with the individual stories there, but what does a success story look like for maybe this first person that's transitioning out? So what were their behaviours like at the beginning, and how are they living now?
Yeah, look, a number of our referrals have come from a hospital setting. So as we all know, working with people living with dementia, hospital's just about the worst place you can be. So, pardon me, a whole lot of aggression and behaviours related to, confusion about the environment, frustration, maybe being inappropriately or inadequately supported with those kind of dementia skills that you need to have when you're working with somebody who really is very complex. I think we found that the environment has more of an impact than we even realised. We knew it would obviously be preferable for somebody to be in a purpose-built environment, but we had a gentleman who was smashing TVs, who was attacking staff. His children were scared of him, and he was pretty much sedated, 24/7. To coming to the unit, he now gardens, he's very calm, he's very settled, he has a lot of interaction with the staff because it's all around that individualised support. So because we have a higher ratio of staff to residents, because we have the physical space, because we have weekly visits by a psychiatrist, a GP, clinical nurse consultant, it's just a much more intensive support, but really guided by the individual. So it's amazing to see the difference in people that I think in the past would have just been deemed too hard. No service is available to support them. So yeah, it's quite amazing really to see some of the individual stories and even to see a lady who is being transitioned out in the coming month or so. She's going back to the facility who referred her initially to the program. And they're amazed. They sort of said, we had thrown everything at trying to support this lady and we just couldn't manage her. And we never thought that she'd be well enough to come back. But now she is, the medication's at a more suitable level. She's just more settled, calmer. again, as typically happens with dementia, you have that bell curve of BPSD sort of happening and then petering off a little bit. So time plays a part as well, I think, often. But yeah, it's great. It's really, really rewarding to see that, the personal success stories.
Did anyone else have any questions for Elizabeth? If we knew of someone, Elizabeth, do we just ring you, or how
DSA. So
yep, okay.
Dementia Support Australia, they do all of the assessments nationwide. And usually, because we're talking about really complex individuals, they are usually already in the system. So, DB Mass or the Severe Behaviour Response Team will generally have had some involvement with that individual prior to the, escalation of the referral to the Specialist Dementia Care Program. Yeah. But I think, and something, I actually had a meeting this morning with the government department who are just following up every couple of months to see how things are tracking. And they said they've learnt a fair amount about how to do things differently with the phase 2 approach, because I think there's not a lot of awareness amongst potential referrers on what the program is, how it can help, and how to refer, and whether somebody's suitable or not. And because working in the sector, we all know that time is a very valuable resource, and it's difficult and frustrating to know where to go when you're needing, really specialised support. And if you don't know of this program, or you don't know enough of this program, it's often easier to just stick with what you know. So I think the publicity really needs to be ramped up a little bit so that referrers and hospital staff and, residential aged care facility managers are aware that this program exists. Yep.
Yep, for sure. Well, you've obviously impressed us so much that nobody's got any questions, Elizabeth.
Or I've just
did absolutely everything. Kirsty.
Hi guys, how you going?
Good, how are you?
Good. Just the one question, Elizabeth. Where are you currently getting your most referrals from today or in the last 12 months? I mean, I can see that you want to change that, but what has been your consistent referral point?
Look, most of them have come from hospitals. And because we're in Sunshine and our InReach team is through Northwest Mental Health, which is linked to Sunshine Hospital and the sort of psych support in that local region, I think that's where the promotion has been focused. So we've had most of the referrals from hospital settings. Again, though, it's interesting to think if residential aged care providers were more aware of the program, and the word is slowly getting out there, we might be able to help people before they end up with a hospital admission, or ideally linking them in with this specialised service nearer the beginning of this escalated behaviour. Because I think often it does get to the point of really aggressive, property damage, people are fearful, relationships are strained. It gets to that point that's quite a desperate situation before people are referred to the SDCP, which obviously is not ideal.
Elizabeth, it's Donna. Can I ask, do you get many referrals from the eastern suburbs side?
We have had a couple. Interestingly, so our VMCH unit only opened in November last year, and we actually had a suitable community client who was referred to the Hammond Care site because they were already up and running before ours was open. And it was really interesting, actually, and we only knew about the program because I was involved in the startup. And the case manager happened to be talking to me about, this family is really challenging, and, can you talk to them, and can we just throw some extra resources at them? And after talking to this family, it really looked like they needed some specialised support. This lady did end up in the Caulfield site, and it is absolutely amazing seeing her progress through 12 months at that site. And then she's recently moved out into one of Hammond Care's memory support unit sites, still in the Caulfield campus. But again, quite amazing that somebody was managing at home until the point of needing specialist dementia care support. So it was a husband caring for his wife, and it was a pretty alarming situation. The husband was really reluctant for any formal supports to come in. He'd had some bad experiences. He was absolutely adamant that his wife would not end up in resi aged care. But she, you know, it was sort of doubly incontinent. She was up all night. He had locks on everything. Nobody was sleeping. The family wouldn't visit. They were estranged from everybody. Like, it was a really, really, really challenging situation. And this woman is quite content now, and he's reasonably happy with the support, which is a big win. So yeah, it's just really nice to see somebody who, I mean, I wouldn't have known where this lady might have ended up if there wasn't a program like this, because it was just no standard setting that supports, you know, people in the aged care system would have been suitable for somebody like that.
Yeah, because we do get referrals here at the Peter James Centre Aged Mental Health Service, and you know, we do try to steer the ones that are just more dementia only to a DB Mass and to the Dementia Service Australia and the SBRT team, but we don't often get feedback to say that they're thinking about referring them on to this specialist inpatient unit, the one you've got set up at Villa Maria. We never get them saying that that's an option. So it's good for us to know, because maybe we'll ask, should this be considered perhaps?
Yeah. And I think personally, and it's been difficult with COVID because I know a lot of us have been working remotely, and we're moving away from things like paper flyers and handouts and bits and pieces, which, you know, 10 years ago were all the rage. We constantly had just reams of paperwork for people that, as a staff member, was really helpful because you could see which services visually were available, local, suitable, and you could just physically give that flyer to somebody. So I think some sort of marketing material around this would be really helpful for us as referrers, potentially, because it needs to be front of mind as well.
I don't think it's front of mind for our triage service at all, and they get a lot of the referrals and then filter them back to DSA or dementia support services, or for, you know, counselling. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that they're not aware that there's a service now in our area. We knew about the ones further over, but when people live in this area, they don't want to be travelling all the way to the northern suburbs or have their person go into even Caulfield. For people living in the outer east is a bit too far for families. So it would be good to be closer.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, our facility that has this unit is in Sunshine North, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
Local area, but the aim is in the phase 2 rollout to have one specialist dementia care unit in each of the primary health network regions. Right. So because there's only 10 currently operating across Australia, they've been a bit slow to, you know, spread the support around. But a lot of our residents who are currently in the Sunshine North unit are from kind of country Victorian areas, like they're travelling a couple of hours to get, you know, that kind of support.
So there's none on the eastern side other than the Hammond Care unit in Caulfield? No,
Caulfield's the closest, unfortunately.
Okay. Oh, that might be why, people, they just, when they live on this side and they've got to drive across peak hour traffic and all the freeways and all the rest of it, they're just reticent. So, okay.
Yeah, so hopefully in time. But, and I'm happy to feed that back as well, because I think obviously dementia is not going away. No. And, you know, there are people everywhere who need the support. So if we've got individuals who are suitable, but the distance or the geographic location is the prohibitive factor, that's important for, you know, the department to know maybe we need to expedite the next phase.
Yes, and have one at least on the eastern side or down the southern side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Elizabeth, in your experience and industry knowledge and networking, do you really foresee that realistically coming to fruition soon? Or do you think that's just a conversation at this stage for the Eastern support network to have one of these?
Look, it's always been in the long-term plan ever since the inception of this concept in 2016. I worry a little bit with COVID and things like that around the funding requirements, because there obviously is a huge amount of funding for a program like this. You've got higher ratios of staff, you've got to pay clinical support, psychiatrist every week to visit. The cost is in the back of my mind, if I'm really honest, around whether that will impact the timing. I'm really counting on the success and the evidence of that in this phase 1 rollout to hopefully carry a lot of weight for the department in their future planning, because again, I think we had to do something. The numbers are on the rise. We've got so many people living with dementia. The flip side of COVID is that the extra stress and pressure on individuals trying to manage, particularly in a community setting, is just outrageous. So something needs to be done. And again, these people being in hospital settings, not ideal for anybody. So I don't think that's the answer. It's just a matter of, I guess, government priorities and how quickly things are going to move. I don't know. This is just my perspective, but yeah, it's a good question though. Anything else? Sarah, this might be a world record.
I know it might be. It certainly might be. I was just thinking, wouldn't it be lovely if that level of funding and that level of staffing could be implemented across every aged care facility.
Yep.
For the success of everyone living in them. I think that'd be wonderful. Not realistic, but wonderful.
But the interesting part about it, and I'm fortunate in my role because my role is sort of sitting broadly across our organisation, looking with a dementia lens about dementia services. I've been trying to introduce some of the training that we've delivered, whether it's from the clinical nurse consultant or even psychiatrist, around BPSD and that type of thing for that PCA cohort. Sorry, I'm talking in acronyms. It sounds like a different language, but I assume you're all following. So if we could support the PCAs that are within the Specialist Dementia Care Program, the same way that we're supporting the general population, of direct care workers in the community and in a resi aged care setting, it would be amazing, because it's just all about resourcing people with the training, the skills, the knowledge, knowing who to call, when to call. One amazing part of I think that has contributed to the success of our residents in the SDCP is having 24/7 access to the clinical nurse consultant and the psychiatrist. So incidents are happening at 3 or 4 in the morning. They can pick up the phone and call somebody who's designated to that unit, who is specialised and will respond. So I know we've got DB Mass, but that's a much more generalist service compared to somebody who knows the resident, they know the history, they visit weekly, they know the whole ins and outs and, kind of triggering elements of potentially what had led up to that incident. So you're right, Sarah, it would be amazing if we could have some of that injected into general dementia services.
Even just the awareness of that, Elizabeth, is a game changer, and that the potential is there, and start that conversation. That might just be the beginning. I know it's not realistic to have the funding. It's a massive amount of money, and it's a very competitive space too, with different different organisations having more specialist support in those areas. So even if we all had that information that we could spread, certainly our guys would love that. We don't often get a lot of people with because we deal with our members entry level, just being diagnosed, but we support them for over 2 to 3 years before they start moving into more significant support. So but we have got a couple of people that would be really beneficial we've been able to refer to, but unfortunately we couldn't refer to you guys because you're just too far away. Same with what Donna said, and we've just had to go to Carers Gateway or Dementia Australia and DB Mass. It just feels like our hands are tied, or we don't know what else to do. I feel helpless, I suppose, because we really are connected after 3 years of supporting someone to then have nothing to give. So so this is really good, just having this information to pass on in a conversation in our carer support groups is really good. So thank you.
No, you're welcome. I think I'm sort of segueing slightly, but yesterday I was on site with one of our memory support unit setting, so not the Specialist Dementia Care Program, a different site. And I was talking to a couple of the direct care staff there, and one of them happened to ask me, and they are amazing. Like, I was really impressed at the work that they're doing, the passion, like the empathy. These two ladies in particular were just, they were texting each other out of hours to follow up about, you know, a different resident and this and that. No, I forgot to do that. And she really, you know, wanted a cup of tea. Can you make sure that she gets, like, just amazing, the level of detail they were injecting into their everyday working lives. And I really want to help sustain that and encourage that. And, you know, I love it when people are excited and, you know, brought to life by the work that they do and the outcomes that they help achieve for people and someone living happily in resi aged care. And one of them happened to ask me, she said, oh, do you know if there's any pay difference? You know, if you're working in a dementia, because I'm trying to introduce a whole lot of extra resources, training, supervision, all this type of stuff, so that we have designated staff for a memory support unit as opposed to mainstream PCA, you know, aged care, just mainstream, not dementia specific. And so I spoke to our HR system and they said, technically, unless you have a level, like a qualification level that has a piece of paper that determines that you have done, I think it's level 4 dementia as part of your certificate 4 training, there is no difference in pay. And I sort of queried, well, maybe that's something that needs to change, because we need to recognise and encourage and support people who are willing to go that extra mile. We really want to promote, you know, quality dementia care, and you can't expect people to be outputting, you know, all of this extra energy and effort and attention and enthusiasm if there's no monetary reward. Or I don't know, I feel like we need to marry those two a little bit, like the training and whatever, with some kind of compensation for people to acknowledge, we really want to keep you. We know it's not a well-paid industry. I don't know, I worry that we're going to train up all these amazing people and then they can't stay in the roles because they're not getting paid enough, or they'll go on to something else. But yeah, so somehow, I don't know, I feel like we can take some of the learnings from this program again and bring them back to influence people more broadly and across community settings, as you say, because that's where it starts. Yeah,
that's I think really relevant, because one of the Royal Commission into Aged Care findings was that the level of education and the depth of education for care workers has to change, improve, increase. But if it's not linked to an extra monetary value, well, exactly like you said, how do we keep these staff, these skilled staff?
And you can see the difference it makes for individual residents becoming familiar with people, getting to know people, whether they know their name or not, it's not the point. Family members, seeing the same faces when they're coming to visit, all of that stuff. I mean, it just fits in with everything we're trying to promote around, you know, familiarity and routine and trying to create a home-like environment. And yeah, it's still not quite coming together. So, but I'll get off my soapbox. I could go on all afternoon. Does anyone else have either a question or an update or anything they wanted to raise here that might be interesting or useful for somebody else in the room?
I just wanted to ask Kirsty what the Umbrella Cafe is, please. I can't hear you.
Hi, Sophie.
Hi.
We're a charity that creates social groups for families living with dementia. They're freshly diagnosed new people. It's very similar to the Memory Lane Cafes.
Okay.
And we have a carer support group that's popped in the middle there, in the middle of the 2 hours. So it's very little bit segregated kind of 2 hour sessions. And we have volunteers, local volunteers that run it. And so our job is to teach them how. So it's really good. But it's very small, localized cafes.
Okay.
So we can capture the local, it's decentralizing it a little bit. So it's, yeah.
So is that out in the eastern or outer eastern suburbs? Thank you.
We started in the east as a little a hobby, I suppose. A group of us community people were really passionate, and then it got quite exciting people got quite excited about it and started up in community centres. So we did 3, Box Hill, Blackburn North, which are really local to my house. It's been convenient. But then as the funding started to increase, we've actually gone out to Mornington Peninsula. So we've got Sorrento and Seawinds out there. And our next job is to try and keep going. We're a social group for families living with dementia, which in COVID times is a challenging space.
Yeah.
So getting everyone online is our new trick.
Yes.
Actually, as I speak to you now, we've got 2 cafes running online, so it's really sweet. But it's a challenge because people are deteriorating before our eyes because it's been difficult to register new members because of COVID. Our core group of people are deteriorating, so we need to do those referrals. I think that's our responsibilities. Yeah, this is important.
Kirsty, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Get in touch.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsty.
All right, well, if there's... Sorry, was somebody else wanting to say something? No. Yep, we've broken all the records, Elizabeth. Thank you all very much for coming along. Thank you, Elizabeth, for presenting. That was really interesting. And every speaker we hear from, I think, increases our knowledge of the services that are out there for people with dementia, meeting by meeting. Next month's meeting, the speaker will be Dr. Heather Hill, who is a dementia-specific dance therapist. She's going to tell us about a project she was working on pre-COVID in Singapore. So look forward to that in September.
Sounds great. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Lovely to see you. Bye-bye.
Girls, bye.